OngsHat might be the most bizarre early internet story that's ever existed. It's a mystery named after OngsHat in New Jersey, a mystery revolving around mad science experiments in the woods, a portal to another world, and a trail of leaked information online that some believe reveals the truth of all that's secretly gone on there. Who's behind it? Or is there anything behind it at all? I dived into the history of OngsHat to trace it back to the source and tasked remote viewer John Vivanco to help get to the bottom of what really happened in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. You want to figure out what's real and what's fake together? Join me, investigative researcher Rob Counts and John Vivanco, for a metaphysical show that's out of this world. John, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. How about you?
Good. OngsHat, this is such a wild story. So a man named Wally Ford purchased 200 acres of land in the New Jersey Pine Barrens, which, by the way, is already a super weird place. And he founded the Moorish Science Ashram and built a commune that flourished in the early to mid 80s based on chaos science, spirituality, and politics. Now, as you can imagine, this attracted some rogue scientists, a couple of dudes fired from Princeton, including the Dobbs twins, who are Frank and Althea. Now, the Dobbs twins grew up in a UFO worshiping cult and were used to living on the outside of the mainstream, but they also believed in things like cognitive chaos, which they submitted as their PhD thesis, which led to them being cast out of Princeton University. Cognitive chaos is a really interesting theory if you haven't heard of it before. These guys believed that the brain was just like the fractal universe that could be controlled like a lucid dreamer if a person tapped into the morphogenic field, as they called it. We've talked about this in other episodes on the mind, like when we referenced people like Rupert Sheldrake, who proposed that this field exists everywhere and that memory is inherent in nature. So if someone taps into the collective field, then they can learn information others have already learned, sort of like the Akashic records, etc. Right? Now, the ICS, or the Institute of Chaos Science, thrived on Tantra, Sufism, Ismaili esotericism, alchemy, psychopharmacology, biofeedback, and brain machine meditation techniques combined with science. So this is already getting pretty wild. Now, they had different stages of spiritual and scientific exploration. An early stage, it involved developing a device called the egg. Now, a person went into a modified sensory deprivation chamber and focused on a computer screen while wearing electrodes. So their psychological data went into the computer. It was like a brain helmet, sonically stimulating their brain cells and then kind of like direct brain waves and specific mental physical functions. Now, theorems created graphic animations that map different states of consciousness. So while the brain was feeding the algorithms, the iconography appearing on screen fed the person's brain like a feedback loop. Now, all this is really important because this starts to get crazy quick. Some of the experiments with this involved the alchemical use of mind drugs, hallucinogens, relaxants, now focused attention tinctures. And some experiments even involved sex experiments and mastery of their own bodies. Okay, again, now this is where it starts to get weird. So next, paranormal things started happening as they realized that reality and their bodies could be controlled down at the cellular level. People experienced suspended animation, inner heat, lucid dreaming, rapid healing, remission of chronic conditions, and the absence of disease. Okay, and the next stage of their experiments, it gets a little bit more sciencey. They were trying to dive into the quantum level. They wanted to see when the wave function would collapse, like when a wave becomes a particle and the observer effect would create reality. So this all has to do with the observer effect. The theory of the observer effect, as you know, is that originally they thought a particle and a wave were two separate things, and in physics they realized that somehow these two exist simultaneously. Now, what they realized was really bizarre. They found that there was absolutely no collapse, that the wave and the particle continue to exist simultaneously, and they could ride waves of reality as long as they wanted because they were alternating worlds. Okay, so the fourth iteration involves more of this egg that we mentioned before. What is the egg, and what exactly were they doing with this thing?
Yeah, that egg was supposedly a sensory deprivation chamber for one. It supposedly blocked electromagnetic frequency. Inside, the person would be sitting in a chair, and they would have an apparatus on their head measuring brainwave state. There would
And
be
this is with
also,
this that's where they were looking at the screen, right?
and they're looking at a screen in front of them, and there's sonic sounds being pumped into the egg, frequencies like theta, like like Monroe Institute type stuff,
Yeah.
hemisync idea in that chamber, and basically pushing them into this sort of trance-like state that's useful for quantum studies, or useful for understanding psychic phenomena or whatever. So, but apparently, it went a step further, right? There's apparently an algorithm working that is working with the brain states of the person, to change frequencies, to change vibrations in order to keep pushing them forward in that state. And then apparently it goes so far as to transport them out physically.
Okay, and that actually totally relates to this fourth iteration of their egg design, because on the day
Right.
of the spring equinox, which is when they planned all of this, they were experimenting in the egg, and the entire thing, including the person in it, vanished completely from the laboratory. So for several minutes, it was gone, but then it came back with the person beaming because he'd succeeded in riding the egg to an alternate universe, a thing they called the next door. Now, this area of the Pine Barrens had uh, notable radiation because of a nuclear waste dump that was previously there. They were able to resist radiation sickness because of their mind abilities they developed, allegedly, which they called this self-directed generation. In fact, all of these people that were working on this experiment were trained in it, and they developed techniques for through the egg, carrying children along inside when they traveled to other dimensions in this egg, which they claim did not work for adult non initiatives. And I'm just thinking here already, I'm thinking this all sounds pretty legit, because kids are kind of like a clean slate, and adults have so many formed ideas of the world and notions that it would keep them from, I guess, having that clean slate when they were in this situation. So non-adult initiatives uh, who were not trained and were not able to kind of get into that state, that kind of adds up here. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, in the Montauk stuff, we've seen children being used because of the malleability of their minds. In that, when they do have a weird experience, they more likely, more than a grown up, they wouldn't like have any sort of like psychological break, a mental break, psychotic break, because of the malleability of their minds, right? So I didn't know that. I hadn't heard that part where there were kids involved with this.
Yeah, this just so mere is reminding me of the Montauk Project in so many ways.
Not that far away either, is it?
No, I mean the Pine Barrens are a few hours away. I mean, Long Island is a long island. Well,
Is
it's
a
not even an
Long
island;
Island.
it's a long island. But this is where it gets pretty interesting because um, this traveling into other dimensions, they claim all inanimate matter inside the egg could also be carried across. So if you're wondering what that is, they would be able to bring obviously their clothes with them, any objects that they wanted to carry, including their establishment. They could bring or build,
Supplies, water, food, whatever, Yeah.
yeah, all of that stuff into this other dimension. But they say they could not bring, and I mean, they're talking about even building, bringing buildings over, right? So, but they said that they they could not bring over a hidden laboratory where the gate to another world existed. On the other side of this gate, you're probably wondering, was a very similar forest to the Pine Barrens, but in a world that never developed human life. So they end up colonizing this area of the upside down, I guess you could call it, Pine Barrens. And they started bringing things over like Airstream trailers, chicken coops, yurts, and they ended up spreading out in this area. They would come back to Earth repeatedly to take materials like food and coffee, books, things like computers and stuff, but they ended up colonizing this new world. Now, only initiates whose minds had overcome their restraints or what they said realized itself and liberated itself from self sickness could be a part of this bizarre journey. And legends say that the government got wind of the experiments going on at Ong's Hat, stormed the compound, killed 7 members of the group, and some believed it was a U.S. Delta Force or even other Russian or Danish militaries, which I mean sounds super bizarre. I never in
Very
any of
specific.
very specific. I never hear of Danish military getting involved in any of the American bizarro experiments, right? So this is some crazy other dimensional journey stuff going on, things that sound very similar to other studies that are being done in remote viewing, even correlating with the Montauk project, where psychics were putting on a similar helmet and developing portals through the Sage radar that existed over on Montauk. So if you were wondering how all of that worked, that's a little taste of it. We're going to be doing an episode down the line when the new Stranger Things season 5 releases.
So this whole story that we know of, and I don't think a lot of people know of this story, but the story that we know of actually began in the 1980s by a man named Joseph Matheny, who was the reporter, let's just say, the investigator of this story. And in the 1980s, pre internet, he, he came across this information and him and his friends started to put information out through various zines, magazines, but they were underground magazines, magazines that were, this is pre-internet, so alternative world, coffee shops, bookstores, newsstands. You could find information on this particular event in the classifieds, where you can send away for the dossier, the package, so that you could go investigate it. It showed up in UFO newsletters. It showed up in paranormal magazines. So it was being spread far and wide in sort of this transmedia way, right, throughout different, even faxes to like newspapers and stuff like that, to push this out far and wide. I think some of these pamphlets about it even showed up right around the site at Ong's Hat in New Jersey. So, so in the late '80s, he goes on the internet. Well, it's not the internet. He dials into a BBS, a bulletin board system, because back then, you dialed directly into these bulletin boards where people were talking to each other, and then from there, you can kind of telnet out to the very, very limited ARPANET, basically. And so he did that. He went in and he started posting this stuff within various news groups, and people in those news groups started to get involved, right? So this legend is being now put out to the public, limited public, in a way that was quick and instantaneous, right? So as this story's developing, he's very interested in transmedia and different ways to spread this information. So he creates website websites around this, or website. He creates these different ways that people can receive the information. He starts selling CD-ROMs of with this information on it, and making books about it, right? Eventually, in the year 2000, he goes on the Art Bell show, right? He's on the Art Bell for like 3 hours. He is the reporter of this incident, and he lays the whole thing out from inside, right? So he's reporting on this, and from there, what happens is that you've got millions of people listening to Art Bell. I mean, this is the height of Art Bell, and from that point, people start flooding into the bulletin board system. The next thing that happens is that he has people. The next year, he has people showing up at his house, trespassing on his property, looking in his windows. One person, he had to drive off of his property through gunpoint. So basically, he shut this whole thing down because his claim was that the he got more than he bargained for, right? The conspiracy people did not believe him, or they were very angry with him. So the ones that didn't believe him, the true believers, thought that he shut it down because he was warned, you better stop spreading this, that kind of thing. The typical whistleblower kind of idea here. And then other people were very angry with him. The thing with all of this is that you have to understand him. You've got to understand where this guy came from, where Matheny lived, what he was doing before all of this, right? Like, this is a really big component of the story to truly understand what was going on here, as opposed to the surface level idea of what happened at Ong's Hat, right? And early on, so early on, what he was doing, what he did on the BBS systems, was he went right to the Church of the Subgenius, the Slack server, right? If you know what the Church of the Subgenius is, it's a huge clue as to where he's coming from, right? So I guess I explained Church of the Subgenius, right? And Discordians and that whole genre. So this is like a early 70s, early 1970s creation. And he's got clues within everything that he put out there that lead you back to this stuff. So
Like,
the Church of the Sub,
so what you're saying is, basically, if I'm understanding this, this is an alternate reality game. I mean,
it's an ARG.
but it's
See, back then it wasn't. See,
right.
ARG, the idea of it was created in like around 2010, and
Sure.
then that was like applied to this, and so now they call this like a proto ARG, right?
Right.
Even
Because
though that concept wasn't like around,
sure, because
right?
he's leaving breadcrumbs in these different magazines and classified ads and all of these places. People are putting all of this together, probably getting together in groups and trying to figure out how all of this works and where it all leads, and then they're ending up at the dude's home.
Yeah, so that's the later part, but the earlier part is, so this is a really, really, really important story. This is a really important story, but not the story of what supposedly happened at Ong's Hat, right? And we're gonna get to that part. Uh, so there's two different worlds colliding here. You've got the Church of the Subgenius, the Discordians world. You've got
Which
the
yeah,
anti.
what
You
is
got
that?
the. Oh, okay. So let me finish that thought first. So you've got
Sure.
Robert Anton Wilson, the Illuminatus conspiracy, the Illuminatus trilogy, those books from the 1970s. You got the Church of the Subgenius, you got the Discordians, you got the Principia Discordia. You've got this whole world, a very niche counterculture world that all of a sudden meets with the counterculture world of Art Bell. And this guy, Matheny, is right in the middle of it. And it just explodes because they're two different worlds with two different ways of approaching things. And this is what I find incredibly fascinating. And I find this to be a model for something. So let's just talk a little bit about Church of the Subgenius, right? So the, if you've ever seen like the guy with the pipe, he's 1950s looking guy, that's Bob Dobbs, J.R. Bob Dobbs, who was like a 1950s traveling salesman, and the whole religion of the Church of the Subgenius is a parody religion, and it's based around this 1950s like traveling salesman. He sold fluoride, right? So everything about it is a parody around religion, and the Church of the Subgenius created in like I think the late 1970s, and it was very prominent in this sort of underground zine world. They call them zines during that time. No internet, right? And the Bob Dobbs was like their prophet and messiah, pipe smoking, grin on his face, fictional salesman, right? He's their messiah. Um, so the central idea of this church is slack. It's the central concept. It's sort of an ironic salvation where ironic salvation from your ordinary boring life, your boring conformist life, the members, they quest for slack, which is a representative of freedom and ease, the good life, and they do this through absurdist kind of means, right? The whole Slack side is very it's obtuse. It's a little obtuse and hard to grasp, like enlightenment would be. But it's basically doing a lot of nothing and just doing surreal things. So it's really based off of parody and satire. It's culture jamming. It takes aim at like organized religions. It takes aim at consumer culture, conspiracy thinking, and the self help movement,
So
and it uses their rhetoric.
yeah, it's basically the hipster movement of the 2010s in Brooklyn.
Right, it's like that. It's ironic. It's
Yeah.
culture jamming, like that whole thing, and then so it's like based off of Discordianism, which was in the 1950s. That's when that was created, and the Principia Discordia was their holy book, their surreal holy book. It's got satire, parody, religion, philosophy, absurdity, and the central joke is like all order is chaos, all chaos is order, and it insists the universe is essentially chaotic and seriousness is a trap, so everything's ridiculous and funny. And so out of that comes pranksterism. So a lot of these guys, like if they're really into it, they're just pranksters. Like again, the Discordians would slip fake flyers everywhere, fake like religious sermons out there, bizarre materials into everyday life of people in order to make them question what's real. So their hoaxes are like plays, right? They make these weird alternate realities, and they stay in the reality. And so when they're in the reality, like if you're in the Church of the Subgenius, the game is not a game, but the game is a game. But when you're in it, the game is not a game. It's totally real.
It's
And
LARPing 1.0.
it is. It's LARPing 100%. And so that's what he was doing beforehand, right? He was LARPing this scenario, and then he finds the internet. He goes onto the bulletin boards. Now, the first bulletin boards he goes on are the Church of the Subgenius bulletin boards, and those guys already know they're going to just LARP along with them.
Right.
They're not the Art Bell crowd,
Right.
right? They're just going, and it became this crowdsourcing thing where people in that community just started adding to it, researching and adding to it. It's creepy pasta. This is actually the origination point of creepy pasta. This is where it comes from. It's made up stories that other people verify and add to.
Right.
The game is not a game, right? And you never break character. That's why he goes on. That's why he makes the websites. That's why he goes on Art Bell. If you listen to the episode, 100% convincing to anybody that doesn't understand where he came from, right? But there are Easter eggs all over the place. Like, for instance, the twins, the scientists, their last name was Dobbs,
Yes.
Dobbs, Bob Dobbs. I mean, there are Easter eggs everywhere to guide you back to his origination and that he is a Discordian prankster. I mean, he even worked with Robert Anton Wilson at the Esalen Institute over a weekend to create an alternate reality role playing game for the people who were there. Right, so he was involved with other Discordians. There were people involved with him the whole way in helping him create this thing. Right, so when you had that point, now from my perspective, it's like mind blowing that he would go on Art Bell
Yeah.
without the realization that those people over there are more apt to believe what he's saying than the people on a subgenius bulletin board, right? And he is going to get the crazies. As you know, it's like when you step into the conspiracy world, things can go haywire with people, really haywire. And now you're putting out this story and you're acting as the reporter investigator for it, and now you have all these people, like millions of people that have listened to it, that you're guaranteed there are a certain percentage of people in there that are going to come and stalk you, guaranteed. So that's what I find so fascinating, so interesting, that point, right, that point of convergence. So they flood the board system, and now, like, half to most of the people on that board system believe it and are investigating it, right?
Yeah, for real investigating it
For
now, not
real
like not
investigating.
LARPing and investigating, they're actually
Exactly.
investigating it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, and
Right.
and
Right.
I'm getting some major Channy Project vibes here, in a sense, because okay, I mean, just to take a step back for a minute, if you're an intelligence group that wants to create a couple of psychological operations and see what people's reactions are to specific storylines and or specific information, some of it being real, some of it being fake, whatever, whatever, that would almost be the perfect way to enter that entire world back in the 80s, because
Right.
you have an established LARPing system where people are not going to break character, where people are going to take it to a different level, and you're releasing information out into the public. And then Bro goes on to Art Bell, and the entire thing actually explodes in a way that you cannot predict.
Exactly. I mean, that to me is really funny, really fascinating. Um, so when I approach this, like from the remote viewing standpoint, um, I think, well, how do we usually approach these things? We approach them from the standpoint of, is the story real or not? The story's not real. The story is not a real story, not at all. Um, so then where do you go from it? Now, okay, let's talk about this. Like, this is really important here. So here you have, what's he doing? Like, before he begins the internet side, what's he doing? He's got friends. He is creating this story. He's got a scientist involved who is an actual physicist who is really into alternative physics ideas in the Bay Area of San Francisco. He's got other people helping him out with this, and they're coming up with this. They're creating the story. They're writing flyers about it. They're writing pamphlets about it. They're putting it out. They're writing faxes about it. They're taking time and effort to spread it through different medias as much as they can, right?
So now Matheny first created this project around 1988, and he worked with an anarchist writer named Peter Lamborn Wilson, the physicist that John just mentioned, named Nick Herbert, and an artist named James Coneline to fabricate a paranormal legend about New Jersey. Okay, just to kind of give you an
Right,
overview of that. So
right.
continue, please.
Okay, where I'm going to go with this, because see, I have to task on this. I got to figure out, like,
How are you going
you
to
know,
task that?
what do I task on? Like, the story's nonsense, right?
Well, because what?
Already,
Yeah, but okay, but the story, right? So going over the story information at first, super compelling, seems to align with other projects that we know the U.S. government was doing around the same time. And I'm thinking, okay, this sounds. There's some things here that sound legit based off of peripheral research.
yeah, but okay, so this is that there is your hook.
That's right.
Right there, he's got you hooked because you're from the conspiracy world. That's the hook. See, okay, before the internet, intelligence agencies would use the exact same method that he and his friends used to spread disinformation. They use multiple sources through multiple media venues, so that when a person is investigating something, they come across this information from there, and that information from there, and that information from there and there, and they go, oh man, this is real, right? So this is how disinformation operations work, seeding across multiple mediums, right? um, they anchor it in fact, right? It's always anchor in fact. So Ong's Hat, it's a real ghost town. There's a real scientist involved here. There are real fringe concepts, right? Real geography of the Pine Barrens. Um, in that world, the Intel playbook, well, disinfo almost always begins with the kernel of truth. Always. This is your hook, right? Real event or location or document so that there's an anchor. Operation Mockingbird, it leaned on real news outlets to propagate disinformation through various people and sources. They still do that today. You can even see on the news when people collage together reporters from across the country saying the exact same phrases when it comes to social engineering, right?
Exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
I mean, it's a little like over the top these days, right? But it's also very subtle. So then there's also the blending of fact with fabrication. So you've got Princeton scientists, chaos scientists, you've got tantra, you've got quantum theory, you've got these fabricated dossiers about the egg. This is the classic limited hangout, right? This is the limited hangout.
Yeah.
You're blending like real classified material with invented elements, so debunking becomes really difficult. It's like putting Cold War UFO leaks that are mixed with genuine radar sightings with fake documents, right?
Yeah, this
Right.
yeah, this is
Okay.
some Richard Doty stuff.
Right. So you're muddying the waters. So skeptics and believers can't agree on what's real. And then you've got the multi-channel seeding, You've got flyers, zines, fax networks. Then it shifts to bulletin board systems, web forums, finally coast to coast. So like in the Intel world, that's staggered releases across different platforms, right? It creates this illusion of independent confirmation. You know, so this is like the diversifying of channels. So the narrative seems to emerge organically everywhere. And then you never break character. Like Matheny, he didn't break character. He didn't admit that it was fiction, even though he put Easter eggs. He didn't admit it until 2001. So
Yeah,
he stayed in character
it
on Art
sounds like
Bell.
sounds like he didn't break character until a guy showed up on his porch and he had to pull out a gun.
Exactly. Right. So this is the plausible deniability part. Now, in operations, that person usually just fades away, or like the whole thing gets reframed, right? So the operator is ambiguous. You don't know who it is. So then you've got the feedback loop, right? Now you have the feedback loop with the audience. So those early users in the forum, they added their own theories, they added documents, they role played along with him, strengthening the immersion of it, right? So in successful disinformation, in rolling out successful disinformation, it's like you outsource that labor to the public. You've got the researchers. The public is like really into it, and so they're your researchers, and they expand the story. And we see this. You know where this stuff has been happening. We see this. It expands and perpetuates a narrative, right? And then you've got the psychological hook, which is what you were talking about before, which, well, there's things about this that are real. Of course, that's the psychological hook. That's that promised hidden knowledge, right? The egg, the parallel dimension, fringe science and esoteric that we know is real. So that is the secret forbidden truth framing, right? And it plays off of people's cognitive biases, right? It's like the appeal of secret knowledge, the distrust of authority, that kind of stuff. It's
Yeah, which are
thrilling.
all legitimate.
Now, here's the thing. The last part of this is that the exit strategy that he took is not the exit strategy that the Intel playbook would necessarily follow. He had to publicly state it was fake because of what was going on with him. And that's when he took off from it and shut it down because it was too much. Now, you can see where I go, what am I tasking on here? I know what I'm tasking on. I'm tasking on if this was the internet's very first, you've got to transition from one media to another. The very first disinfo campaign around paranormal, portals, alternative stuff. That's where I go, right? The very first, because see, look, what was he doing? He was transitioning from old media to new media, and he was bringing that with him. He was already doing the same thing that Intel World did to push disinformation out, right? Now he takes it to the internet, the untested world. What happens in that world with how do you spread disinformation? How do you do it? What do you do? What does that look like? How does that grow? How does it grow organically? How do people face that and take it, right? So that becomes the question. That becomes the big question for me ultimately, because when you get right down to it, like he hit every single major structural note of our modern disinfo design that we see these days, right? He's anchoring, he's blending, he's like multi-channel seeding, he's got feedback loops, he's never disclaiming, he's got psychological hooks. So what it looks like is like it's the first full-scale rehearsal, or it is an internet disinformation mechanic playing out, right? So when we get to remote viewing on this, it's like you got to look at him. You got to look at like where, why was he doing this? What was the purpose?
Yeah, who was talking to him? Who was he networking with? What was his mind frame when he was going on to the Art Bell show or spreading this information around on the zines, et cetera, right? I mean, that's where my mind goes is what's his psychological state? And then are there elements of this story that are legit, that are real? Were there experiments going on so close to the Montauk area or not?
Right. Right. Well, there's nothing on him. Okay, so number one, the story's not real. Number two, no, he's not involved in that in the intelligence world. He's not. Now, people around him advising or helping him with certain aspects could have been. They could have been. But this literally goes back to him being an artist, being a prankster, being in that Discordian zone, being in that world of the game is not a game. When you look at what he did, so people fall into different camps. When you look at what he did, you go down into different camps. You go into the world of I'm a conspiracy believer and I believe the story because it has the hook, right? Or I don't believe it at all because I'm a subgenius guy, Discordian, and I know that the game is not a game when you're in the game, and that's all there is to it. Or I am a person that gets angry at him because he's just hoaxing. The fourth area matches 100% exactly, except for the last part, with a disinformation operation. Now, this isn't a disinformation operation. It's not. Now, I thought, well, could this be a test? Well, what if this is a test run, like how the internet treats in this brand new internet to the public? How do they treat it? So let's have this operative. We'll just pretend he's an operative. Take what he was creating there and then put it on the internet and create this, multi-platform experience for people and see what people do with the belief around it, right? See how we can manipulate their minds with it, right? That's the fourth area that you've got to think about.
Yeah.
Now, no. Him personally, I don't see anything in the data that refers to him as being that at all. I don't see that. It doesn't show up. But I guarantee you 100% that what he did is now used as a white paper, as a model for disinformation campaigns on the internet. 100% data reflects that.
Really?
Yes. Yes, this was the first time, the very first time that happened. I mean, people, as they went on to the early like bulletin boards and into the early internet, brought their ideas and stories with them that they propagated. But this would have been, oh, now you're not going to believe this. You won't believe this. So he was in an interview and he said, I consulted on the John Titor time traveler scenario, and I was even one of the 4 John Titors online.
So this guy is not, if that's true, this
If
guy
that's
is
true,
no stranger to LARPing on a major.
exactly. And we know, because we did a John Titor episode, we know that the Titor thing was fake, was a LARP.
But
We know
very,
this.
very well. I mean, very well written because of the different types of computers that they were using, the mainframes that only a very small percentage of people would have known.
He was
That,
really into the early computers and the early computing 1980s computing world. He really got involved in tech. He worked at Adobe. He helped develop the PDF, and he had a background in working tech in the Bay Area. And so he was into all that old stuff, right? And he had claimed that the people who created the tighter LARP saw what he did, and they wanted to mimic it. They wanted to mimic it. So this is a really, really, really important. Like, okay, so whether he's lying or isn't lying, it doesn't really matter about the tighter thing, because the tighter thing I know is a LARP. We already know this through remote viewing. The really important thing is that this is the model. So when you have the model of how disinformation is spread, you can line it up to other.
you can replicate it.
But see, people have, right, you could replicate it. You could understand if you're in a LARP or not. But the problem is that people have these really strong cognitive biases, right? Where it's the hook, where you got the hook and the limited hangout. that they really want to be a part of. And that's what the Art Bell crowd comes in, right? That he was not expecting, he was not expecting that Art Bell crowd to be acting the way that they were acting necessarily. So I think this is such an important thing that happened, and really important to understand and study what happened here from the perspective of disinformation campaigns, because as we all know, in the genre that we're in, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Not just that, but people LARPing. Creepypastas. So creepypastas are the same thing. The creepypasta is meant to, you throw a, some people even suspect that he may be the one in the creepypastas that is spreading portal stories, right? You seed it, and then you watch how people add to it. It's the same thing. Now, people in the creepypasta world know that it's a LARP, and they begin to add things. And then what you have is you've got YouTube people who grab it for the clickbait, and they'll just put a voiceover on it and make a scary story, and they don't know if it's real or not real. They just pull it from creepypasta world. And so then all these fake stories are propagated. You hear it over there, then you hear it there, then you hear it there, and you go, gosh, it must be real. So it's a lot of how this stuff works.
Well, so John, are portals real?
Yeah, but we're not talking about that.
I know, but that's what I find kind of interesting about this, is that this guy, this fictional story writer slash
He's a
artist,
transmedia artist, yeah.
right? Which it says in his bios and that
And he's
website
an
that we went to,
anarchist. He's
and
a
he's an
he's an
anarchist.
anarchist, Discordian, transmedia artist.
So is it his love for spreading untruthful slash anarchist slash chaos theory type of stories is the what drives him? He just loves pranking, and that's why he
Well, yeah, that's what it is. It's a culture jamming thing, and you could find, look, it isn't just like a broad cultural thing. You could find smaller cultural bubbles that you can go culture jam, you know. And when you're talking about a person who what is involved in Discordianism, um, like hoaxes are games. It's like what
it's part of the
Robert
culture.
Anton Wilson called guerrilla ontology. Look at Robert Anton Wilson's books, the Illuminatus trilogy, like written in 1975. If you've ever read those books, so it's the same thing. It's taking he probably got the idea from that, because Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea wrote the Illuminatus trilogy, and they're really great books because they're mixed with satire and real stuff about the Illuminati, and created new things, right? Where a lot of that stuff was used by unwitting researchers that aren't in on the game as being real. So a lot of the garbage that people throw around with Illuminati stuff comes from Robert Anton Wilson's satirical books on the thing. So there's been a history of people doing this before him, and he chose that. I mean, he listened to Art Bell. I mean, he was into Art Bell even
Sure.
before this. So for me, it's kind of like, man, he's got some huevos to like be knowing he's concocted this story and then jumping onto Art Bell with it, and then afterwards going, no, 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 the game's over. It's like, dude.
Well, what's funny about it too is like, you're kind of, when you do that, you're playing with a bit of fire.
Yeah,
And the fact that he went through with all of that and then ended up getting burned from it is almost more comical, or is much more comical than even putting the story out to begin with. So
right.
my question is, I guess, final thoughts here on this entire thing being a well orchestrated story is, how do people out there watching this show and that are living out in the world, how can we tell the difference between some of this stuff that's coming out that's true and some of these more intricate storylines that are just a bunch of nonsense?
Yeah, and that's the very hard part. Now, a lot of people, nobody ever found anything, around because I know a lot of people had gone out there, and people still go out there because a lot of people still believe that this story is a real story because
They hope they'll find an egg.
right, they hear the surface or they hope they get out of the dimension. It's like all of these stories have some escapism involved in them, and he really added that into it. Like, can I go to that dimension and get out of here? Like, I don't like this place. I mean, so there's that aspect. And so people have gone out there and tried to find it, research it. People looking at satellite photographs of the area and like adding those to the whole mythology of it. And he took a lot of what people found research wise and added it in as well, and fake interviews, and he really like made it very intricate and multi-layered, very intricate with fake people and real people in order to spread this story around even more. Classic, absolute classic disinformation. Absolutely. So it's really hard to tell the difference between what's real and not real. Now, most people, like I say, will just look at that surface story and then run with it from there because the hook and the cognitive biases that they have override everything else, right? They override everything else. So in researching this stuff, you have to like not run down the path of your cognitive bias and that hook. You have to go backwards and start looking at where the story's coming from. Go backwards, because if you don't go backwards, you're going to go down the path that they want you to go down, the rabbit hole of spinning your wheels, and you don't explore anything else, and you end up making YouTube videos about it and discrediting yourself, right? And no one else listens to you when you do find something incredible, right? So it's all geared for that front, or to cover some other thing that was going on at the time, some other project. So you have to go backwards and look at who's the one presenting the story, where it came from, all of the little niggly weird things on the edges and in the background that that feel that feel off about it. And so, but this thing really differs from what normally happens with these, where the operator just fades away, disappears, before he's caught. Like if he was an operator, he was not insulated, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely not insulated. Like, he has crazy people coming to his house, and he wasn't expecting that. That like would never happen on an operation, for one thing. So you can pretty much understand that it was not an operation just by what was going on, even though it looks like one. But
absolutely.
again, it's like, people don't realize this stuff. So to me, it's apparent. It's very, very, very apparent.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts on this are I was always wondering where the hipster movement came from, and I feel like now I have a little bit more information on why those weirdos have been acting in contradictory ways
Yeah, it
since
goes way back.
2010.
It goes way back. I know.
um, but no, but I think that this is what's you know regarding what people are thinking about this. We have to we have to call out hoaxes when we're finding them. That's a part of this whole um, this channel's mission, is what's real and what's not. Where how do we traverse these things, and how do we look at them? And that's a part of exactly what we're doing. And I think there was a lot of super interesting things in that story, and then it all gets turned upside down by a guy naturally involving himself in a world that he doesn't understand as well as he thinks he does, and it all getting turned upside down. Um,
He
and
outed himself. He's in the LARPing world. He's like, no more. The
right,
game is not a game.
yeah, the game's not a game. I had to pull out a gun. Right. And I think though I'm actually right now in the process of researching and developing a show on the Montauk Project, which has a lot of similarities to this, but that has more real life breadcrumbs than you'd ever imagine. That we're going to go over in that episode.
Well, he worked with Peter Moon, who
Was a
was
part of that,
he was part of that. So he worked with Peter Moon.
and Peter Moon
So
is a
he's
journalist.
yeah, a journalist. Yeah, yeah. So You don't know like what's real and not real also when it comes to Montauk.
That's true, and that's gonna
Yeah.
be a whole part
Yeah.
of this entire thing, right?
How many stories has this guy consulted on to LARP, for the purpose of LARPing? It's one thing you gotta ask yourself. He's in
That's
the
actually what I'm asking myself right now, is that if
Yeah,
this guy was sort of the godfather of LARPing and disinformation campaigns, is there consultation going on now of work that he's bringing in to inform intelligence agencies when they're trying to throw people off of the scent of something?
he's not involved in that world, and I wouldn't like, yeah, I wouldn't go down that path. He's not involved in that world. It's more like he inadvertently created the first
Correct.
internet disinformation campaign that is now a model for everyone else in intelligence to follow.
Well, and I think another interesting part of this is that this is how, in a lot of ways, without him knowing, how propaganda actually works, where you're focusing on a pain point that a majority of society has, and then you're exploiting that pain point, and you're giving alternate solutions that drive them down a certain path into whatever direction you want them to go. I mean,
Right.
that is the cornerstone of propaganda and how things actually work out there in the mainstream world, right? So all of us, I think, need to be on our toes when hearing things like this. When a story really fascinates us, you have to be able to look at it from an objective standpoint, I think, when you're coming into all of this, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So for those of you guys at home, would love to know what you guys think out there about Ong's hat, what we found about the egg portals, and any other information that you might have or your opinion on it, whatever it is, even if you disagree, definitely comment below. Let us know what you think. We hope you liked this metaphysical episode. Remember to like and subscribe to help the channel grow. If you like what we do and want more, we couldn't end this conversation here because it goes way deeper than this. If you want to hear the rest of this bonus content, you can subscribe to the Mystery Junkie tier or higher on the metaphysical.tv. That will get you access to exclusive metaphysical episodes, director cuts, and topics you won't see anywhere else. Plus, your subscription to the metaphysical.tv also gets you about 1,000 more episodes on mysteries, ancient civilizations, cryptids, UFOs, and other awesome topics. You can also get a bag of delicious metaphysical coffee if you want your mornings to be interstellar, or metaphysical merch so everyone knows how much you like Bigfoot. And for those of you at home, we hope you guys thought this episode was out of this world.